I thank the Speaker. I want to commend my colleagues who have been down here on the floor of the House of Representatives for the most part for the last hour talking about the importance of defending life, those infamous or famous or important words, I should say, in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nothing could be more important than this body focusing on defending life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And my colleagues focus on life as we sit here now, 49 years removed from a Supreme Court decision taking out of the hands of the people and putting it into the hands of unelected judges decisions about the beginning of life, when life begins, the important reality of a people defending life. What is controversial about defending life? It's a question for this body. What is controversial about defending life? And when we talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when we talk about living on this earth while God gives us the precious time we have here, what are we going to do with that time? And are we going to live free? Are we going to be able to pursue happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? One might wonder here now, a year into the current administration, the Biden administration, whether the average American would say that he or she is free to pursue happiness. Are we free to pursue happiness? When in fact, just a few miles, or frankly, a few thousand feet from this chamber where we are right now, restaurants are being chastised and pursued by the government of the District of Columbia, representing this area that forms our nation's capital, because those restaurants may not believe that it is in their interest or the interest of the people that they serve to be checking papers, to be checking so-called vaccine passports or vaccine passes. One restaurant in particular over on 8th Street, which is one of the early restaurants into 8th Street as it was revitalizing, that is being fined, berated, harassed by the government of the District of Columbia for wanting its doors to be open and not to harass its patrons, for them to use their own free will to make a decision about what is in their interest. That they don't want to live in a republic where you're forced to show papers, to walk about and to engage in society, to freely move about and engage in commerce. The very heart of the kinds of ideas that the founders meant and that Jefferson meant when he penned Pursuit of Happiness. That we not allow a government through tyrannical policies to interfere with our pursuit of happiness, our ability to have a business, our ability to go out and take care of our family, our ability to move about, to engage in commerce, to create wealth and opportunity for our children and our grandchildren, to be able to get health care, to be able to be secure in our possessions, secure in our belongings, secure in our own homes. And I would ask this question: is the United States more secure than it was a year ago? Is the United States stronger economically than it was a year ago? Is the United States stronger on the world stage? Are we safer from our enemies than we were a year ago? Is our border secure? Are we able to afford energy and have reliable energy to heat our homes, fuel our cars, provide jobs, keep us warm in the winter, cool in the summer? Are we able to do that better than we were a year ago? The answer very clearly to all of those questions is a resounding no. Do you think it is an accident that I just spent 2 hours in a hearing in the Judiciary Committee bemoaning the United States Senate for holding the line on the filibuster, which Democrats and this president wanted to throw over the wall in the name of voting rights? Because nobody can oppose something called voting rights. They put up those words they call Voting Rights Act, and they name it after people that we serve with in the chamber to provide maximum guilt if you dare stand up and say that the people in the states ought to be able to decide how to ensure that the elections of the people that represent them are secure. That you dare to have a voter ID favored by 80% of the American people. But yet, let's go back to what I just said. I got to have an ID just to walk in and buy a hamburger in the nation's capital. But I can't have an ID to vote. No, no, no. That's Jim Crow 2.0, I'm told by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I actually had colleagues on the committee today walking through the horrors of the poll tax, the jelly bean counting, all of the obstructions put into place for voting in the 1950s, 60s, that the Voting Rights Act nobly pursued to correct, and then tried to compare that to voter identification. Tried to compare that to wanting to make sure that mail-in ballots aren't abused by anybody, any party. Even though, by the way, that those bastions of crazy conservatism, Jimmy Carter and James Baker, came out in a report over a decade ago that the New York Times quoted saying precisely that mail-in ballots are the area where you have the most fraud. Now, all of us want to have integrity and belief in our elections, but my Democratic colleagues want to use that issue to divide us, as President Biden literally admitted yesterday in his 1-hour marathon, wandering, meandering press conference. He literally said he couldn't say whether the elections would be legitimate this fall unless we embrace the legislation that he says must get passed and that we must set aside the traditions of the Senate to jam through, and all of it very clearly to set the stage for a lack of faith and belief in the elections that are coming this November. Again, I ask, is America stronger or weaker? Is it richer or poorer? More secure or less safe? We know the answer, and that's why my colleagues on the other side of the aisle wish not to talk about those issues. We don't want to have a debate about crime on the floor. Do any of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to come down to the floor right now and have a debate about crime in the United States? Do they? With a 50% increase of crime in Austin, a 50% increase of crime in San Antonio, a 19-year-old woman shot in a Burger King in New York City, a 24-year-old student murdered, walking the streets of Los Angeles, train robberies in 21st century America with litter all over the tracks in Los Angeles. Do you think that's an accident? Or could it be the radical leftists that are funded to take over the district attorney's office in cities across America, radical city councils like the Austin City Council, leftists in this chamber who believe that letting criminals out on the streets, that believe in not prosecuting people, is going to make our country safer? It is empirically, obviously untrue. And the American people see it, and I promise you, take this bet. We will not have a debate on the floor of this body about crime while I'm here this year. Won't happen. My Democratic colleagues wouldn't dare have a debate about crime because they would get absolutely decimated. They sure as heck don't want to have a debate about the border. You want to talk about 2 million apprehensions? You want to talk about 1 million people released? You want to talk about dead Texans? You want to talk about fentanyl pouring into our communities, 100,000 dead Americans, opioid poisonings of our youth, kids taking Xanax and dying because cartels are funneling into our country while China drives it right up through Mexico? Not a person in this chamber on the other side of the aisle wants to sit down on the floor and have an adult debate about why our country is much less secure and much more endangered at the hands of the cartels and at people making money, trafficking in human beings, undermining our security and safety in the United States of America. I promise you, Joe Biden and the Nancy Pelosi Democrats have no interest in having a debate about the border because it is an embarrassment. It's a travesty. Ranches are getting overrun. People are dying. Bullets being fired across at our own Border Patrol, National Guard having to fire at cars coming across the border, livestock getting out, bodies stacking up in Brooks County, Texas, body trailers, cartels making hundreds of millions of dollars on a daily basis, driving fentanyl into our kids' communities and schools. No. We do not want to have a debate about the state of our border. Do we want to have a debate about the state of health care mandates? No. This body has no debate but embraces rules. We must wear masks, they say. For a year and a half, we've been excoriated, even fined if you don't wear a mask on the floor of the House of Representatives. Masks which are very clearly proven, fabric masks, to have no real discernible benefit over the last year and a half of the mandates of must wear a face covering. And they say, well, are we going to mandate N95s? So we're going to have to wear N95s on the floor. Do they want to talk about the negative effects in the studies of wearing N95s for a prolonged period of time? What that does for people's health and well-being, breathing carbon dioxide, minimizing your cognitive ability if you wear N95s for a long time. Some people might joke, would it make any difference on the floor of the House if you minimize the cognitive ability of members of the House? Could argue that it may not make any difference whatsoever. Looking in the mirror myself. We don't want to have a debate on the floor of the House on anything, by the way, much less the reality of what has been happening with respect to this virus and our response to it. And what Anthony Fauci engaged in with respect to the reality of the truth of funding gain-of-function research, knowing full well the dangers, working to cover that up, hide from the American people how this virus came about, not wanting to pursue the truth on that, not wanting to pursue the truth or conduct studies on natural immunity. We have study after study after study coming out right now. I can pull up my phone and pull up study after study now, finally, demonstrating and showing how natural immunity is more powerful than vaccinations. And people don't want to be able to have that honest conversation. An adult leadership would have done like the nation of Japan. We believe that vaccines are effective for a large group of people. We believe that there are some risks. You're adults. We won't mandate. You decide. We can't do that in the supposed land of the free. We sit up here and we stare at that American flag and we talk about the Senate being the greatest deliberative body. They don't really debate. This being the people's house, the people's chamber. When was the last time the Speaker heard a robust debate on the floor of the House with multiple members? When was the last time we offered an amendment on the floor of the House in open debate that wasn't predetermined by all of the rules overlords who govern our lives? Democrat and Republican, I do want to say. 6 years since we've had an amendment offered on the floor of the House, offered in open debate. You want to know why we can't do anything in this chamber? Because we don't ever debate. We don't ever actually have a discussion and throw things out there and then vote. Maybe, just maybe, we come to some bipartisan agreement. I'm happy to work with colleagues on my other side of the aisle. Dean Phillips and I worked on the PPP Flexibility Act. Abigail Spanberger and I have introduced legislation called the Trust Act to deal with stock trading, believing that might help improve people's faith and confidence in this body. I've introduced numerous bills and passed numerous bills, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. That's not what this is about. It's about a broken body, refusing to actually debate, refusing to actually engage, refusing to offer amendments. Both sides do it. That needs to end. And the last point that I'll make on that point, if you want this body to function again, you have to stop spending money we don't have. If you keep writing blank checks, how on earth is there a check against the wisdom of the policy? You just keep writing a check to keep doing the same thing or to do something different. You can't run a business that way. You can't run a home that way. You can't run a church that way. You can't run a legitimate school that way. But no, we just keep writing checks to fund the expansion of government, to fund the creation of programs, no matter who's in power. And over the last year, we've seen what that causes when it's then left in the hands of an administration that literally does not care about the rule of law. To be very clear, this administration is ignoring the rule of law, ignoring their oath, ignoring their duty to enforce the laws of the United States, ignoring their duty to secure the border, ignoring their duty to stand up in defense of the men and women in blue, to follow the laws around the United States, ignoring their oath to stand up and defend the United States against our foreign enemies, hold the line against Russia, push back on Russia, sanction them, hold the line on Nord Stream 2, stand alongside Ukraine, push back on China, stop appeasing them. Don't leave $85 billion sitting there in the hands of terrorists when we walk away and abandon our duty and leave those men and women on the field and then have 13 dead Marines to show for it. That's the legacy of the first year of this administration. But will President Biden, when he strolls to that podium on March 1st for a so-called State of the Union, and we're all spread out and all wearing masks and doing whatever the heck we're going to do, not actually doing the people's business, will he address any of those issues? Will he talk about border security? Will he talk about how we're weaker around the world? Will he talk about the crime on the streets of Los Angeles, New York, Austin, San Antonio, Chicago? Will he talk about the businesses getting crippled by mask mandates and health mandates? Will he talk about the children who are now having mental health issues, the people who are sick, the diseases that weren't dealt with, all to push a vaccine mandate that goes contrary to the pursuit of happiness and our right as Americans to live free? Will he talk about any of those things? Will he talk about the fact that the United States of America is sitting on one of the world's largest reservoirs of energy? And yet we're wondering, even in Texas, whether you can have the lights on, because we've built no nuclear power plants. We've slowed down our production of clean burning natural gas, all chasing unicorn energy policies of wind and solar as if they can possibly power the world at the level that is needed for the proper amount of human flourishing, while 3 billion people around this planet do not have access to abundant energy and power. Will the President of the United States come down here and talk about that? Or will he get up there and just talk about, well, we're going to be net zero in our carbon production by 2035 or 2050? He'll make up some totally arbitrary number without regard at all to what that does to the price of energy and the availability and abundance of energy. All of this has real life consequences for Americans. People die. Houses get cold. People can't get access to energy. They can't afford energy. They lose jobs. You have stagnation. And then you have the brilliance of this administration and the brilliance of those in the media starting to talk about energy and food price control. Because of course that's what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will resort to. They'll sit there and bemoan markets when they don't let the markets work. Healthcare markets never work. Well, we haven't had a healthcare market in decades. It's an absolute lie. And I'm looking at you, big healthcare. I'm looking at you, pharma. I'm looking at you, hospitals. I'm looking at you, big insurance. You made out like bandits after Obamacare. You minted money. And probably 3/4 of the people in this chamber fattened their wallets and their portfolios riding the back of all of that big healthcare enrichment, all at the expense of poor Americans around this country trying to get access to a doctor without having to call some bureaucrat in the government, the VA, their insurance company, or whoever it may be, but it sure as heck isn't their doctor. We don't have health freedom in this country. We have mandated big health care, big government, big insurance, bureaucracy. And everybody knows it. Everybody knows it because you all had to deal with it. You've had to call somebody. You had to call some kid sitting in Omaha in some phone bank telling you which doctor you can go to 2,000 miles away. That's the truth, and we all know it. And we sit in here, we roll in here, and we say, let's spend more money and create another government program. Let's spend more money we don't have. Not one person in this body will come down here and truly debate any of these truths. When you're $30 trillion in debt, when you're funding the very FBI going after parents for daring to stand up and defending their children in a school board meeting, when you're funding Department of Homeland Security that is literally lying to the American people saying our border is secure while hundreds of thousands of people come across. You want to know what happened in that synagogue? Because we don't have a dang clue who's coming to the United States, and this administration doesn't care. They don't care. They don't care what list they're on. They don't care whether they pose a danger to the United States of America. They don't care at all who's coming into this country. And they sure as heck don't care what's happening to the people of Texas, Arizona, or frankly, everybody around this country who are having to bear the costs, or having to bear the burden of what wide open borders means to the United States of America. Complain about Mayorkas? We should impeach him for failing to faithfully execute the laws of the United States of America, endangering Americans in the process, ignoring the laws of the United States. And that's what is happening. That's what is happening. America is poorer, sicker, and less safe a year into the Biden administration, and that is the truth. Our enemies know it. That's why Russia's going after Ukraine. That's why China is rattling on a daily basis. That's why Russia, China, and Iran are talking about joint exercises. That's why the cartels are emboldened. That's why there are people marching through Mexico from all over the world coming to our southern border. That's why there are people on the streets breaking into businesses, assaulting people on the streets and killing them, raping them, happening every single day in the United States of America with reckless abandon, while Democrats in district attorney's office, Democrats in the House of Representatives, Democrats in this administration do nothing about it and do not care that the American people are left holding the bag. And then they want to talk about taking away our Second Amendment rights and our ability to defend ourselves. Well, that crap ain't going to happen, because we're going to defend ourselves in the land of the free. We're going to stand up and defend our communities and defend our families. We're going to stand up in defense of the Constitution and limited government and freedom and be able to protect our families and protect our states when this administration is letting this country burn and then dares to do an hour-long press conference lecturing the people for wanting to make sure their elections are secure, for daring to say that we should have voter identification, when that same administration is mandating vaccine mandates that is causing healthcare workers to lose their job. Healthcare workers in long-term health facilities to be unable to carry out their job. And then talk about, the burden on hospitals. Well, you just caused 20% of nurses to have to leave because you were mandating they take a jab for something that's a year old that Pfizer is making billions of dollars on. And then we won't even have a hearing about why on earth we're having this virus in the first place, because of what Anthony Fauci knew and what NIH was up to and what China was up to. And we won't have a hearing about natural immunity. We won't have a hearing about the dangers and levels of dangers of the vaccines, what they may be. And again, my polio-stricken father, who's 79, has been vaccinated. I refuse to say whether I've been vaccinated because I think it's a principle for Americans that they shouldn't have to say. My point is, there are people for whom the vaccine makes sense. There are people for whom the vaccine does not make sense. Mandating a jab in a 5-year-old is irresponsible, and it's dangerous. And we should have that conversation instead of blindly walking around preaching what other people should stick in their dang arm. But that's what we do in the people's house. I'm sitting here in an empty chamber with the speaker, respectfully. And that's it. They're all jet fumed out, leaving town. Oh, we shut down early. Let's get out of here. Or they're out at some, fundraiser or something. Let's have a debate on these issues. Let's seek the truth. I don't know all the truth on all of those issues. I don't know the specific risks. I've read a lot about what's going on with vaccines, positive and negative. But it's becoming very, very clear that it doesn't do squat to stop the spread. So you're left basically saying, well, it's better for you so that you don't die in the hospital. Well, let's look at the data on that. But why don't we just present the information and let the American people decide? Japan's rate is a lot higher than ours, and ours has mandates. All they did was say, we think it's good. There are some risks. You decide. We can't do that in America. We can't just go down to the border and say, you know what? It's better for migrants, better for Texans and all Americans, bad for cartels, bad for China if we secure our border. That's the truth. Talk to the migrants getting abused. Talk to the people in South Texas. Go to Laredo and Webb County. Sit down with the brown people in Laredo who will say, we're pretty ticked off at this administration about how they're handling the border. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle might be up for a rude awakening pretty soon about their expectations of what voters are voting for them and what voters are not. Because there's a lot of people in this country that are sick and tired of an elite in this town immersed in the swamp, promoting big healthcare, promoting big tech, promoting big government, minimizing the rights and the abilities of Americans to live their lives the way they see fit. That is our calling as we head to 2026, our 250th birthday of the United States of America, which comes up in 4.5 years. Will we be able to say that we live in the land of the free? Will we be able to say that we are pursuing happiness? That we are the country of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And we will only be able to do that if we stand up and secure our nation's sovereignty, defend our streets, protect our families, stand up to enemies around the world, and limit this body to the job that it was given in the Constitution, limit our spending to the dollars that we have, and responsibly lead this country and represent the people so that this country can, in fact, be great in our agreements and our disagreements in a federalist republic where we're able to live free. And with that, I yield back.